There are a lot of JRPGs releasing nowadays, and it can be overwhelming. JRPGs are known for their great stories, but sometimes to get to the end of that story can be a drag. Whether you play them all or play a few, I can't tell you how to spend your money, but I can tell you how great Granblue Fantasy Relink is. This game hit everything I wanted out of a JRPG. Great combat, a great story, amazing visuals, it wasn't too long, and it had great waifus. I had played other side games titles like Dragalia Lost, but I didn't really know what to expect from this one. I couldn't put this game down, and the conversation has moved on from is it good to is Granblue Fantasy Relink the perfect JRPG? Hello world and all who inhabit it, it is I the Great Sayran, and while no game is perfect, there are some that come close in my opinion. 2024 is just getting started, and we've seen some pretty good titles with a few more bangers coming down the line. Just in February alone, we have Persona 3 Relink, Helldivers 2, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, just to name a few, while giants like Power World loom over our head, taking up the rest of our precious time. As great of a time as it is to be a gamer, it's also a bit stressful. Imagine you're a fairly responsible adult with bills and other responsibilities, both financially and time-wise. You can't possibly play every game, and if you do, then you don't complete it all, and thus the backlog continues to grow. I won't sit here and say to you I finish every game that comes across my desk, but I do try to make sure I get a good impression of them if I'm not particularly covering them in a video. Granblue Fantasy Relink was one of those games where I didn't expect to fall in love the way I did. We all have games like that we've played, and usually they're a part of a series that everyone loves, and maybe we were a bit too stubborn to try. Well, I live in the US, and I can't even try some of the other Granblue games. Granblue Fantasy Relink is a part of a larger series called Granblue Fantasy that basically lives on a web browser. There is a mobile app, but I don't have access to it because again, US, and the web browser just doesn't work anymore. Regardless, I had no entry to the series. There is a demo on the PS5 store, but during all this, my PlayStation account was suspended because I asked for a refund and didn't get it. In fact, I paid them to get my account back. Yeah, so I didn't want to give them any more of my money, and that's why this is a PC review, and honestly, I'm glad. The first thing I noticed about Granblue Fantasy Relink was the visuals. I made a video last year where I basically said I was scared of PC ports because they kept coming out so poorly. I decided to get Street Fighter 6 on PC and honestly had a great time. I do think Granblue Fantasy Relink is much better on PC than it is PS5. The game is locked to 1080p in PS5's performance mode, but that's fine for me. I play most of my games at 1080p on my gaming monitor. Where the PC version shines is that I get to play 1080p 60 FPS at ultra settings with my little 3060, and whenever I upgrade my setup, I can scale this game up as much as I want. I was honestly shocked at both performance and visuals. This game is absolutely stunning, and even in the thickest of combat with hordes and hordes of enemies, my frames stayed locked. I honestly couldn't even try to make this game stutter or lag since ultra is the highest you can go, and I didn't have a 1440p or 4K monitor to really push my hardware. If you're worried about that part, you're fine. Every detail moment of this game feels so immersive. I'm usually not a graphics snob, but I promise this game looks good. Even outside of the game looking good, the set pieces, boss battles, and levels all look great as well. The cast of characters, the world, the cutscenes, the combat, they all had this distinct look to them that was entertaining to watch and play. These are the experiences people want out of their consoles, and it's always interesting when we don't get them, but PC does. Maybe it is the better platform. People have asked me how this plays on Steam Deck, but unfortunately, I don't have one. I'm too scared to buy one because I think as soon as I do, they're gonna release another one. I do see this game going to the Switch too though. It doesn't seem that hard to optimize, and if games like Tales of Arise and Vision of Mana are going to Switch, then this should too. Granblue Fantasy Relink plays as if Tales of Arise and the Mana series had a love child. Okay, let me explain what I mean by that.
What do you mean by that?
Granblue Fantasy Relink's combat is super simple depending on the character, but you can go down the rabbit hole with the 18 plus playable characters with more coming down the road. You basically run teams of 4 characters, each with 4 skills they can use in battle, all with different weapons, different elemental types, and different personalities. Every character has a playstyle that is unique. All swordsmen don't play the same, and even when you niche it down, all dual swordsmen or great swordsmen don't play the same. There's even a character whose main thing is counters. Out of the 18 playable launch characters, you're given 6. The captain, aka the main character, and the rest of his crew. You can switch between them and play as any of them whenever you like, but for main story missions, you have to keep the captain in your party. This actually isn't a bad thing since he or she can learn so many different skills from healing to buffs and debuffs to straight offense. I found them really useful and actually played with them for a good chunk of my playthrough and a bit of post-game. There are some more versatile characters in the mix like Io. She's a mage, so distance and support are defaults, but I ran her with elemental offenses so that she can help balance out my team against against enemies we needed more of an advantage over. The elemental weaknesses matter, but not so much that you want to 100% build your team around it. I had a balanced team that seemed to work for me just fine. I did change characters here and there so that my playable character matched up to the elemental weaknesses of some enemies, but most of the time it was an accidental matchup. I'm sure once everyone and everything is level 100, it'll matter a bit more than it does during the campaign. Team composition is fun because you can set up combos which leads into links and team attacks. This gave me huge Tales of Arise vibes since team composition mattered in that game a lot as well, but there were certain enemies you couldn't really even damage unless you got the elemental matchups right. I will say Tales of Arise finishers and dual combos were a lot flashier, but I consider Granblue Fantasy Relink the prettier game overall. You can unleash your ultimates, aka Skybound arts, in a succession and trigger this bigger ultimate. You're going to need a few of those per match against bosses to make things easier for you. The basic attacks, depending on the character, can feel choppy and end abruptly, leaving you open to counterattacks, but that changes depending on who you wield. I do wish you could call on your crewmates to use specific skills when you want it. Even if there were only two that you could have linked from your other teammates, that'd still be helpful. The companions aren't bad, but there are times I wanted a buff and I didn't get it, or I got a buff but I was low on health so I was too focused on healing to really fight. Having finer control over teammates makes having a team that much better, but I also know that this game had co-op in mind, so your IRL friends would probably know when to time what. Another aspect of team play are link attacks, where you all attack together, and if you can get your link to 100%, you can slow down time and wail on your enemies. There's a bunch of mix and match here and it can get overwhelming, but the option to make your team specifically yours and play how you want is always a win. When it comes to the story, I actually enjoyed it. I think I love most JRPG stories, but without voice acting, it's like reading walls and walls of text. Also, JRPGs often have these long, convoluted stories that really take it out of you. And they are some of the best stories ever told in gaming, but we have to be honest about the bloat. Granblue Fantasy Relink takes a bunch of that out and opts for a more concise approach. The story starts out pretty action-filled, leaving me hooked after the intro. You're the captain of a crew of skyfarers looking to get to the edge of the skydom to meet your dad. We soon find out that the main character and Lyria share a fate after Lyria gave half of her life to save you when you first met. As the story progresses, we learn more about Lyria and her abilities and what that has to do with their story. Though you never get to play as Lyria, she does act as a guest character, doing things like healing your team and creating barriers for you. I don't want to give too much away from the story because it's not that long and it's paced very well, so anything I say could potentially spoil things. I do want to talk about how the story is told though. There's a mix of cutscenes and background lore that I think this game does very well. If you play the entire campaign and never pay attention to anything else, you'll get the entire story, but if you pay attention to things like in-game dialogue and fate episodes, you'll get so much more context. I'm not a big story guy and love when games give me the story this way, as I'm playing. I love when characters have banter during battles and fights. Instead of a cutscene every 20 seconds, just give me a bit of context of what's about to happen next from a concerned cast member. That's why I like to game, to experience the game. In addition to side banter and the normal way of getting story info, you also have Lyria's journal, which gives you extra context of this world through her eyes. You basically have these things called fate episodes, which are basically side stories, mainly text only, that each character has for their own background and character development. Now normally I wouldn't do these, but doing these makes your character stronger, giving them stat increases, extra gear slots, and even boss battles where you get rare drops from monsters you're fighting. I love these because they actually gave me a reason to do them and learn about the characters. Now you can just mash A through these and not hear what they have to say, and I did do that once or twice, but the option is still very nice. I got through this story and a few side quests in about 15 hours. Some people think that's too short, but the post game is where you spend most of your time doing co-op quests and unlocking more and more characters. The world of Granblue Fantasy Relink itself isn't really that huge. There are 2 hubs that you can use, but mostly everything is mission based. The hubs and mission worlds are pretty sizable, filled with hidden treasures, collectibles, and secret paths. I do wish I could explore this world a bit as an open world or semi-open world, but that's not really that important of a gripe. Side quests weren't even that taxing. Just a quick fetch quest for monster parts or something you picked up on your travels. I'm not 100%er, so I didn't mind this, but some people like their game side quests to be better than the game itself, so I guess that could be a con. I passively completed side quests, which means I passively racked up hella rewards to use in trading and upgrading my weapons. The hub world hosts those shops, as well as a quest board where you could take on new challenges and earn really great rewards, including crewmate cards, which is how you summon more people on your team. Post game, we could get an expansive DLC since side games usually supports their titles. We're already getting more characters, so more story and a change to a more open design isn't too far off. This game did break the record on Steam for concurrent players in a JRPG, so I'm sure they're excited about the positive press. Is Granblue Fantasy Relink the perfect RPG? No, nothing's perfect. Giving me a concise story with unique combat wrapped in a game as beautiful and as polished as this has felt like a dream. I totally recommend this game even at full price, and double recommend you play it on PC if you have the supported hardware. For more game reviews like this one, check out my video on Power World. That game took us all by surprise. Also be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.